Hello, and welcome to Learn to Lead Differently. I'm Amy Sgrignoli. Today, I have a very special guest joining me. He happens to be my husband of almost 22 years this year.
That sounds right.
Yes, 22 years. And we're going to be talking about a really personal and important topic, and that's about making a change in career much later in life, right?
Yeah.
So, Bryan, you and I met maybe 27 years ago. And at that time, you had just graduated college and you were a management consultant.
That's right. Yep.
So I didn't know you in college. Did you know you wanted to do sort of the consulting track? Was that something you were pretty certain early on you wanted to do?
No, I mean, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I knew that from day one when I was, in college at Bucknell, I was on the management track, like business administration, but I didn't have a specific job in mind. I had thought about, before I went to college, I had thought about law school, but by the time I got into college, that was sort of like a faded memory. It wasn't something that was really driving me while I was in college.
And what I remember is, you were a management consultant and we were dating maybe a year, and I know that you were kind of feeling restless. You knew that wasn't ultimately where you wanted to spend the bulk of your career.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking around and I'm seeing people that are older than I am now, and they were still on the road and working pretty hard. And I didn't really see a path. There are other paths, but I didn't really understand how I was going to go from doing that. I mean, you remember, I was gone
5 days a week. Yeah.
4 or 5 days a week for most weeks for 2 straight years. So the travel was pretty grueling. And even then, as 23, 24-year-old, like, that was really exhausting. And it was hard work. So yeah, it wasn't really scratching an itch for me. So yeah, I didn't see myself doing that long term.
And I remember, early on in our relationship was when I saw you take your first big pivot, and that's when you made the decision that you were going to go to law school, which was a big decision. And I remember it being very thoughtful. And, you prepared to go into it. And then, you stepped into a very long career in law. So tell me and the audience a little bit about sort of what that journey was from law school and into practicing law.
Sure. Well, I mean, maybe taking a quick step back. Yes, I mean, there was thought that went into that, but I think a very different kind of thought process that went into making the transition from law into what I'm doing now, which I know we will probably talk about later. So yeah, there was a lot of thought, but I think it was, as a younger man, right? No kids, We're not married. There's less risk, right? So making a change and doing something that also had been something that I had thought about when I was younger, that just seemed like very natural, right? So like, I had been out for a couple years. I hadn't gone straight through from college. A lot of folks, right, they go from college right into law school. So I felt like I had lived a little bit and kind of seen the world, at least for a couple years. But it wasn't this like protracted, let me think really carefully, long and hard about it, right? I haven't done a lot in my life that's just purely impulsive. So it wasn't like that, but it wasn't this, hey, let's think about this for 3 months,
right.
type
and
thing.
To your point, I mean, we had no responsibilities other than, we were still dating, we weren't married, no kids. And over the course of about 20 years, you had a pretty long and successful career in law.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about kind of what that journey was like, what you started out doing, sort of what you found yourself gravitating towards as an attorney, what you liked the most.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that really gave me the longevity that I had in my legal career was really kind of pivoting slightly into legal and compliance work, and really ethics and compliance work. That piece, which had lots of variability, like there was numerous different types of problems to solve, and the softer elements that were more about the ethics and the culture that seemed to really align more with my values than just like traditional legal work. Because I started out in commercial litigation and in a law firm in private practice, and that definitely wasn't a good fit. So after doing that for 2.5 years, I spent the balance of my legal career in-house, right? So I started out doing more commercial law and, contracts and just supporting the business. And that felt better because both with consulting and being in private legal practice, you're on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And it felt good to be, more part of an organization. I didn't love that, whatever that distance created, and kind of providing services from the outside. Something about that didn't, I didn't feel connected to that.
So, me being your spouse and living with you, and I mean, certainly during the time you were growing your law career, we were growing our family.
Right.
So we had so much kind of going on. But, I think I saw you continue to take on more and more responsibility. From the outside, I'm certain it looked at just like success, building on success, on success. But I know you were starting to feel a little bit restless and a sense of, is this really ultimately what you want to be doing? So tell us a little bit about sort of that experience over those 20 years in your legal career.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think at first I was just very motivated by an objective version of what people from the outside would view as success.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't feel driven to necessarily work all the way to the top, whatever that means. But yeah, continuing to progress in that career, on that career path. And, whatever the challenge has been, whether it was law school or whether it was my career, there's certain parameters and there's certain things that you identify as like, okay, these things are indicators of being successful, or this is what I need to do. It's sort of a problem to be solved, right? And that's kind of how I felt. At first, I was, extremely motivated by moving up, and you get more responsibility, and you see how other people are leading and doing things, and you're like, yeah, I don't know, I would do that a little bit differently. I would put a different spin on it. I would prioritize this, or I would prioritize relationships with people more, or the ethics part of ethics and compliance, the cultural part was really important to me. So I felt really motivated by getting an opportunity to be able to put more of my my spin on it, I guess. But over time, I think I was getting restless and I was starting to feel unhappy. And a lot of that's about environment, right? And leadership. And if you're working for somebody that you don't see eye to eye with, or if you're in an environment where the culture of the company, it says it's really, compliance is really important, but it is only up into a point, right? Or there's been some kind of crisis that happens and then they desperately need you to be there, right? Some of those things to me at times felt like more of a disconnect between the environment. So as I was moving and time was going on, I was really kind of less and less happy with just the overall path that I was on, and not an environment that I wasn't happy with.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, I think so many people think, I'm starting to feel that feeling of restlessness. And then they think, well, maybe it's just because I need to get to the next level. And then when I get to that next level, I'm going to feel great again. But I think what you were starting to see is it wasn't about going up. It wasn't about necessarily continuing to achieve more of what people would say is a higher level of success. You were continuing to kind of feel like, I don't know if this is really what's bringing me happiness.
Yeah. And I think, but at that time I wasn't able to, because I didn't take the time until I did, right? to really pause and reflect on, what do I value? What's making me happy? You've invested all this time and energy in this career path. Like the thought of stopping and reflecting on, do I want to do something entirely different? It didn't even occur to me. And I'm sure it doesn't occur to a lot of people to just be like, hey, wait a second, let me take stock of where I am and figure out, like, is this the direction, or right time, right direction, all of those things.
Well, so let's talk about that. So I know that like you said, it's hard to take a kind of a pause, right? Things are moving forward. Life is busy. We had, kids, they were involved in a million different things. So ultimately, you did kind of take a step back and start to be very intentional about, is this what you wanted to do? So I'd love for you to kind of share ultimately sort of why you made the decision to kind of do that and kind of lean into it. I know it also had something to do with where we were in our life. It became an option. It felt like it was an option for you to think about something different. But I'd love to start talking about sort of that moment of the pivot. So you'd had this very successful career. You knew this wasn't probably where you wanted to be until you were 65. But you were in your late 40s when you made the decision, like, I'm gonna take stock. I'm gonna actually take a step and think about this. So talk to me a little bit about that, like that moment of like, I want to investigate this.
Yeah.
I want to lean into this, and then how you went about doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like a lot of things. It's a series of moments that builds up to that. And I think before I get more into answering your question, I think one thing that I would recommend that anybody do, and it's not a specific age or a specific time, although for me it felt like I kind of reached that point, after I was kind of mid 40s. So I would suggest to people, if you have kind of a similar career trajectory, to really be intentional and thoughtful and take a moment, even when you feel perfectly happy, content, the path that you're on, to do some of that self-reflection, whether you work with somebody, a coach, a counselor, consultant, or it's something that's more self-directed, to really do that before you potentially reach a point where you feel like you can't or don't want to do something anymore. And but for me, I wanted to take a step back and be really thoughtful, be really intentional, and also make sure that I wasn't just feeling burned out, right? Because that's a totally different situation and different topic. I'm happy to report, after all the reflection and all the time that I've spent on this new path, that that's not the case, right? And I was pretty confident it wasn't. But I think from people looking from the outside in, it could just look like burnout, right? Which is hopefully for people, if you're treating it and taking care of it, is a temporary thing that you still love, you're still passionate about what you're doing, but you haven't invested in self-care and these other things, right? So like, it's a separate topic, but it's an important one, I think, for people to think about.
I kind of want to pause on a couple things that you said, which is, first of all, you stepped into law. You went to law school before we were even married, and then you had, a good 30 or 20 year career after 3 years of law school. You changed a lot during that period. So I think one of the things that's so important for our listeners to think about and remember is that we change over time. So of course, our values, our priorities have probably changed. But I don't know that we take that intentional step to say, let me kind of take a look at where I am in my career, in my life, and does it still align?
Yes.
And to your point, ultimately, you can still make a decision when you've reached the point that you're kind of already answering the question, this doesn't align. But there's a huge opportunity to almost put that into practice earlier on.
Yes.
And it's great if you get the answer of, this is great, I still feel like this aligns with who I am. But to just have those check-ins with yourself, because you are changing, your life is changing, your priorities are changing. So of course, it's possible that the career path that you were on might need to change too.
So I think it's really important that you not look away from this, right? Like that. I think that everybody at some point embraces this deeper reflection and thinking about, okay, I'm not the same person that I was when I was 25, or maybe I'm largely the same, but like the demands on me are different, the needs are different. Maybe college education is out of the way, right? Things change, but I think a lot of times people view themselves as a certain way, and then they don't realize that they really have evolved, or that their values have changed. And that can be a pretty, I think, scary thought. And also, when you do something for 2 decades, essentially, you get pretty used to who that person is, right? You get used to that identity, but it's not necessarily what best serves you or that's really making you happy. So yeah, it was past time for me to do some of that deeper reflection and really think about, where do I want to be when I get to the end of my career?
A little bit of like, what do I want to be when I grow up? But I've already grown up.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think it's so interesting because I think that it is scary for people to do that. I think in some ways, when you're in your 20s, you haven't put certain expectations on yourself. You maybe have only been like, I knew I wanted to go to college. Like you're more willing to sort of lean into the pivots, lean into the shifts. And then as that identity forms over time, it can be really, frankly, scary because you're not sure what you're going to find. And I think one of the things that I want to now get a chance to really talk to you about, because I think is so interesting and quite frankly, very, very brave, and that I was able to experience firsthand with you, was when you actually took that step, you stopped the forward momentum, you took a pause,
Yeah.
you intentionally started to look at it, you started to come to a conclusion that maybe what you wanted to do was fundamentally different than what you were doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because this wasn't just a situation where when you really did this that you went, oh, I think I'm on the right path, but I want to just kind of make a little bit of a right turn. This started to become an exercise in, I'm going to be potentially approaching a completely different career in the latter half of my career. So tell me a little bit about sort of how that felt when you started to recognize that. I know you worked with a coach. What sort of exercises that you did that helped you get to that point that you were willing to kind of understand, wow, a big change may be in my future?
Sure. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. But for me, it really did help to make this a structured exercise and having somebody kind of help lead me through that process. And I had never done anything like that before, right? You just sort of, I don't know. And I guess that's what I'm saying, is that people really should think about making that more of a formal thing that they do at some point in their lives and in their careers. But yeah, it was certainly scary, and there was a lot of doubt there, but there was also a sense of excitement and hopefulness about doing something that is different and feels meaningful. And yeah, it is a fundamental change to go from being a compliance officer to being a counselor, / therapist. But a lot of the things that I was really good at and really enjoyed about the work that I was doing, it's kind of part of who I am. So from that perspective, it feels like a sort of a normal evolution of what I was doing. Like towards the end of my compliance career, I was more focused on the people that were working with me or for me in some cases, and helping them on a more personal level. Like that's what was more interesting and exciting to me, not the underlying work itself.
And let's take a step back, because I want to make sure everybody understands that the decision you made. So as an attorney who had kind of continued to grow your career in the compliance space and had actually kind of moved into a more senior executive level position, when you sort of took stock of where you wanted to go, you ultimately decided that you wanted to become a therapist, a mental health counselor. Yeah. Which on its surface seems completely unrelated, right? And I know that you're talking a little bit about how you were finding yourself really enjoying working with your coworkers and kind of helping them, but also, I think we had found in our lives that therapy and having mental health at the center of our lives with our children and ourselves had become so important. So, talk a little bit about how our personal experiences helped you kind of be open to that idea as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what kind of got me on this track to begin with. I was already having thoughts that would be an area that I wanted to go into for those reasons, right? I mean, it has had such a huge impact on all of our lives, and really learning about our own mental health really through the lens of our children first, before ourselves, strangely. So yeah, it has had such a positive impact on us, and sort of seeing that and understanding how everybody on some level can benefit from this, that was a big source of motivation. So I was already thinking, oh yeah, maybe I'm really good with people. I enjoy talking to them. I enjoy helping them. So it seemed like this natural fit. At the same time, I didn't want to do what I did when I was younger and see something that sort of like, hey, 2 + 2 = 4. Yeah, I should go in this direction. I didn't have the luxury like I did when I was younger to make a decision like that. And there's less runway ahead of me, right? If I go and I do that for several years or even a few years and I realize, yeah, that's not it. That's not what I wanted to do. Well, so that's where that structure and working with someone really was helpful.
And what I think is interesting, and part of the reason that I wanted to have you on the show and talk about it is because I think in some ways your sort of pivot, this change, is an extreme version of a pivot, and yet you've been able to do it very successfully. But I think it's so important because, here you are, someone who went and got an advanced degree in law. You can't be a lawyer without having a JD, right? So that it required a certain academic requirement. And then the next path you picked required a different advanced degree.
Yeah.
So again, when you made that decision, it wasn't just, oh, let me pivot. I've already got the education that I need. It was also a moment where you had to step back and say, if I want to do this, I'm going to have to be willing to go back to school later in life too. So how did was that overwhelming at first to think about? I mean, how did, once you recognized that you thought, okay, I think this is the path I want to go down, knowing that you were going to have to go back to school now in your late 40s, how did you process that?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that was a big factor for me is just the meaningfulness or the purpose or lack thereof of what I was doing previously, and wanting to make this decision or being willing to make this decision was about doing something that I would that I thought I would feel good about.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, have the benefit of we've taken care of a lot of our needs. Some people want to continue on that trajectory, more is more, all of that, but that wasn't really going to fuel me. And so when I thought about it, I had two, after working with a coach, and Erin Owen, she was great and helped me really start. I wanted to take a step back. I think the important thing was, let me really assess what my values and skills are. I have this notion of wanting to help people. That's great. But there were two different paths. I could have gone on the path of what Erin was doing and what others are doing, and she does great work.
Like the executive coaching.
Or, I mean, there's a variety of different
life coaching kind of things.
Yes, all sorts of things. And I was like, wow, I could start, tomorrow. Not really, right? But I could start in a much shorter time frame. I could go and get certified or not, right? It's and I could help people from a career perspective. I want to do that. That's going to be a part of what I'm ultimately offering. But what was more important to me and what was calling to me was more of the mental health component of it, because whatever career you're in, right? Like you're I think only as good as your overall well-being is. And that was something that really spoke to me. And, what I think about is, and this is not something that I think I'm going to do in my counseling career, but all the times that parents came to us and asked us questions about the schools that our kids went to, or like challenges that their kids were going through, and we couldn't talk to those people enough, right? Like there was something really, we had benefited so much and had so many people help us along the way with Chris and getting him into the right environment. And we would find parents who were like in those earlier phases of realizing that their child is struggling or not able to go to school, or where can they go? And you and I would sit down and talk to them and spend time, or even when I wasn't pursued to do that, I would be having a phone conversation with a lawyer, and they would mention, oh yeah, my son is really struggling, my daughter is really struggling, and that would go off on a tangent. And next thing you know, we're talking about IEPs and things from a educational standpoint. So there was something about helping people on this more fundamental level, which then they can they will parlay into their careers and be more successful and be able to show up better at home, in the office, whatever the environment is. Because if you're not doing well with those things, if you're not investing in those things, then it's going to impact you in every facet of your life.
Well, and I think, there's a couple things that I think are so important that we're talking about, but I kind of want to sort of distill them down for our listeners. The first is that, it's not only okay, it's probably in your best interest to take points in your life to assess where you are and the path that you're on, right? And to actually put that into a practice, because you are changing, your things in your life are changing, and it's nice to just kind of do those check-ins. And that can be scary, because when you do those check-ins, you may find that maybe you are being called to do something else, or you are being pulled in a direction. And that is scary, right? But I think that your story is an example of so many different things, like a willingness to question yourself, a willingness to challenge yourself, a willingness to really think differently about your own life and sort of take charge of it, and lean in to all of these things. And someone who was living with you and has been with you through all of this, it wasn't always easy by any means, but there is no question that it was the right decision and has been so fulfilling for you, and has been, I think, such a gift to our family and our lives that you were willing to do something so different, right? And that's what we want to talk about on this show, is people who, we think we have to take these typical paths, or that there's one way to get to success, or that we all have to do things the same way. But oftentimes the most inspiring and the most compelling stories are the ones that took a little bit of a different path. And certainly I think you are an example of that. And like I said, I love your story because it feels extreme, right? Go get another degree, go do all of these things, but you've done it, and you're now already starting to see, patients, or clients, I should say, as an intern, which is really, really exciting. And I think that, also selfishly, I think you have demonstrated to our children, a real bravery, right? A real willingness to make changes at any point in life that can make your life and everyone around you's life better.
Yes, there are moments of doubt. You have to change your identity, and even if that's the right change for you, which ultimately this is the right change for me, that comes at a price, right? It is, you have to make sacrifices. You have to do things differently. We sat down and talked about, do I go to school for 4 years? Do I go to school for 2 years? Right. 2 years involves not working, right. No income from my side. So all of those things, I mean, it's not, I don't want to paint this sort of seemingly perfect picture of it. But I appreciate that for people, it's like, wow, I didn't really think that is a different perspective. I hadn't thought about that. And I've already had people coming up to me, or, connections coming up to me and asking me about that experience, or expressing sort of a desire. I mean, like, yeah, I'm kind of not feeling this anymore.
Well, exactly. And that's honestly, as you know, one of the reasons that I created this show, because it's about stories, and in people's stories, we can sometimes find ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I think other people have already started to find themselves in your story. And I hope all of you listening today, you may now be willing to kind of do something that you didn't think you should, or even explore it. Just explore. That's step one. Just be willing to take that step back, maybe pause a little bit in the middle of the momentum, and, assess. And then from there, you can determine what the next best step is. So thank you again for joining me.
Of course. Yeah. I'm happy to be here.
Yep. Thank you so much. And I hope you all got as much out of this as I did.